Barbie, who, fun fact, Pete used to work for. And Pete was, I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but you were actually around when they originally were throwing the
Well,
idea.
yeah. Towards the end of my tenure there at Mattel, like this was just starting as an idea of doing a film, a live action film. You know, the question at the time was who were we going to get to be in this film, and I'm not going to divulge any of that. I don't think it's appropriate. But there were some really interesting names being tossed around, and then I remember years later when they announced that it was going to be Margot Robbie. You were just like, duh, that makes sense. That seems the obvious choice. Why don't you go first on this one? I'm kind of curious your thoughts because I have thoughts.
Yeah, well, this is directed by Greta Gerwig. I believe she did Little Women and another,
Crush.
yeah.
She
Um,
crushed.
but this movie, like this movie's super risky because, like you're saying, tonality. And I will talk about this because it's part of my point. But there was an original film, and I know like Amy Schumer was involved, and I think she wrote it, and it just didn't work. And I think all the parties, to my knowledge, just thought it didn't work. And so obviously everybody moved on, and that's how this iteration came on. But I think I think that's why this movie did work. One is the tone, like I just mentioned, and the allowing this film to be very self-aware and funny. It's adult humor, but still like kids can watch it. That was key. Obviously, the casting, I do think crushed it. I love that. Like, if Disney made this movie, I think this movie would have sucked because Disney is would just be lost in trying to make people happy versus making a great film. And I think this movie makes like Mattel makes fun of themselves in a way a lot. I loved how it had diversity, but again, they were poking fun of it at the same time. And so it just incorporates a lot of like the you know the elements that Barbie's gone through over the years. Will Ferrell, of course, is maybe you really want to elevate your film. It's just a great role for him as a supporting guy. Like this felt like older Will Ferrell when he would have like a smaller role, you know, and would really just crush it. You know what I mean? Like I thought this was a really good role for him. They let him be him. They didn't try and control him a lot. Um, yeah,
You know, just real fast, but you know, Mattel is a tricky company. How can I word this? Um, the fact that they were able to make a movie like this and greenlight a movie like this with this story, this script, the way it was presented, the fact that they said, "Okay, we'll allow a film like this to be made," um, tells me a lot about them in a positive way. Because I never thought that I would see the day that they would allow themselves to be sort of ridiculed anyway. Because you know, it isn't like we're ridiculing you for the sake of being mean or we think that you're awful people. It is very like playful, right?
yeah,
So I think that that's why it was greenlit, and I'm glad that they did. I think that that was sort of the essence of is this movie going to be successful or not? Like, if
yeah,
they were going to take that step, that leap, and say, look, forget it, let's just make fun of ourselves and
yeah,
let's just be that kind of company. Thank God. Thank God they did, because I think the Mattel of 15 years ago would never have done that
yeah, for sure.
at all.
Like
And
I'm reminded
I'm
of
glad that they did. This is a positive thing.
yeah, for sure. It reminds me of like Fox and Family Guy. You know, like Family Guy always has like those little Fox network kind of jokes where it's
Yeah.
like, stay tuned for three guys standing close to each other and rotating. You know what I mean? Like, and Fox would always do that. And so again, having the self awareness to joke about some of your mistakes. Oh, these are all the shows that Fox canceled instead of us. You know, they just went in 10 minutes of shows that are canceled. But again, like, that's good humor is self-deprecation.
Yeah.
And I think again, I think this is where Disney, I think,
It
needs
can
to
go too
improve.
far, right? Self-deprecation can go too far. I mean, I think this was the
Yeah,
perfect balance of because they didn't use it as like a crutch, right? It was a little added piece of loveliness to it. I mean, the real stars of this movie. Let's get that right. It's that Barbie and Ken, right? Like that's the
yeah,
story. It's their sort of thing. And of course, Barbie's going to go off and figure something out. But I mean, really, that's the fun part of this film, and
yeah,
that's the great part is seeing those two. Margot Robbie, who's so perfect as Barbie, who does an amazing job as Barbie,
yeah,
but Ryan Gosling as Ken is probably the funniest thing I've seen in quite some time.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, and using him as an like maybe I'm doing this whole man thing wrong and I've got to like change my ways of doing things. I mean, that was hilarious. That was a great twist. Um, I think the lessons that not just girls and women can learn from this film, I think, are strong. I
Yeah,
think that this movie was really well thought out. I think it was directed beautifully. Greta
yeah,
Gerwig did what an amazing job.
yeah.
Uh, um,
The number
but
one
also,
movie, the number one movie all time for a female director. So I would definitely
yeah.
want to shout that out. Like that's an awesome achievement.
But then also, I don't know the people who were involved in the set design and the costumes and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like that. Just
production design.
crushed,
Yeah.
beautiful, just a great thing. But unlike, well, do you have anything else to say? Because I've got a couple of little tiny things that I'm not too
Uh,
thrilled about.
Well, I'm gonna say one thing,
Talk about
and
the cast, maybe.
keep this in perspective of what I'm about to say. I think this movie was a perfect film for what this movie was. Meaning, me going to see a Barbie movie, I couldn't have come out more happier with what they did. Like I could not have imagined a better case scenario for this. So like
Yeah,
with the script, the acting, the directing, the editing, like everything, I thought they aced everything for what this movie is. Because again, what do I have to go see Barbie for? Obviously, I've never used their toys, nothing like that. I'm not their IP. However, I can go in here and watch this movie and come out thoroughly entertained, laughed out loud, really enjoyed my 2 hours in the movie theater, and I want to see it again. Like I, I can't imagine a better case scenario for this film. And again, I think again at the end of the day, it starts with the story, right? I think the script was spot on for what this movie could have been. Again, I could have seen
yeah,
this film go in so many different directions, and it went. I love what they did with it. That worked for the characters, like the actual, Ken and Barbie. Like I loved that dynamic, like you're saying.
yeah. It was really good. Um, yeah, I mean they're clearly the stars. The things that okay, in terms of casting, like Oppenheimer in a way, it's really weird
Yeah,
that these movies came out on the same weekend because this movie utilized some really really big names in the smallest of screen times, right? Rhea Perlman
I have.
as the original inventor of the Barbie doll comes in
Yeah,
and
that's
is
cool.
so warm and sweet, and her performance is really really great. John Cena is, he's just being silly, funny John Cena, but he pops in at some point. I think Kate McKinnon always does a great job.
Yeah,
Uh, I think that that willingness to take a tiny role is important sometimes,
yeah,
especially in Oppenheimer, but in this movie as well. I feel like in a way that it would have benefited Will Ferrell more if he wasn't in this movie as much as he was, to be honest. I thought that the stuff with him could have very easily been trimmed down a lot. I think if it was just like the boardroom scene and not all the other stuff afterwards, I think it would have benefited a little bit more in a
maybe,
way.
maybe.
I don't think they needed it because really, like we were saying, the focus is the Ken and the Barbie and what they're going through. It had nothing to really to do about the whole Mattel enemy, quote unquote, and the big bad Mattel company, right? I don't think they needed it. I mean, he's always funny. Like he can do stuff that's funny all the time. I think that's the only thing that I think could have been trimmed a little bit to make this the quote unquote perfect movie for this movie kind of comment that you made.
Okay.
I mean, other than that, I think that they could have. Well, let's just leave it at that, because I can go on and on. But I think at the end of the day, I'm gonna go see this film tomorrow. With because I'm in Italy. I'm gonna go see it with some Italians. It'll be my first Italian cinema experience, and we're all gonna go watch it together. So I'm looking
What
forward to
language is it
seeing
going to be
it
in?
again. What's that?
What language is it going to be in?
It's going to be in English with Italian subtitles.
Okay.